on the side.
Good evening. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chair of the committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public attending aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way out of the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. Meetings of this committee are live streamed on the internet and the council's website. If you're seated in the public area of the council chamber, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast. And lastly, may I ask all present to switch mobile phones to silent. May I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the front row of me to introduce themselves, stating your name only, starting on my left.
Thank you, Councillor Jamie Huntsman.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Michael Fuller.
Good evening, Councillor Duncan Macpherson.
Good evening, Councillor Matt Cortez.
Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening, Councillor Diana Jones.
Good evening all, Councillor Ross Savage.
And may I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again, starting on my left.
Hello there, I'm Mitchell Kitts, I'm the Planning Manager.
Good evening, Sonia Worthington, Democratic Services Manager.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to the Committee.
Loretta Hill, Governance Officer.
Thank you. And may I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Sharon Ainsley.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence, Sonia?
We have apologies from Councillor Sage, Councillor Watson and Councillor Lillis, and Councillor Macpherson is substituting for Councillor Lillis.
Thank you. Item 2 is members' interests. Members, in the interest of openness and transparency, it should be noted that item 4 of the agenda relating to the garage site Carlton Drive, Hadleigh, is an application made by the council. This does not preclude you from taking part in the debate and voting on the matter as the planning committee for this authority. Are there any other interests to declare? No. Item 3 is minutes. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee held on the 3rd of December agreed? Agreed. Item 4 is the garage site in Carlton Drive, Hadleigh, Benfleet. Members, we have an application to demolish existing garages and construct 2 affordable dwellings. I'll now ask the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you, members. First of all, point of order. At 3.2 in your report, it makes mention of 3 dwellings. It should say 2. So the matter is presented to members this evening as the council is the applicant. The application is for the erection of 2 affordable homes in a sustainable location. The proposal is well designed, optimising and utilising underutilised brownfield site. The proposal provides a good level of amenity space whilst presenting no issues over the amenity interests of neighbouring occupiers. It is compliant with the adopted parking standards. No substantive objections have been raised that could not have been either addressed in the officer report or cannot be successfully mitigated by way of planning condition. The site is on land identified for residential purposes in the local plan. Appropriately optimising land for long-term housing is an ambition that is reflected in both local and national policy. Appropriate optimisation means ensuring the correct form, use, scale and type that responds positively to its context. Officers review that the proposal successfully takes these factors into account. Is that coming up on there? The street scene along Carlton Drive is a mixed bag. In the main, the proposal takes its architectural cues from semi-detached dwellings to the north of the site. Most notably in terms of scale, roof design and the chosen palette of materials. Whilst there is a visual departure in respect to the fact that PV panels are integrated into the design, such measures are no longer an uncommon feature, and they contribute to the use of more sustainable energy sources. Save for the cluster of dwellings immediately to the north, there is no clear pattern in terms of plot sizes attributable to nearby dwellings. The proposal's plot shape is somewhat irregular. However, what is most important is that plot sizes, spaces around dwellings, and gardens should be proportionate to the host building. The dwellings would be a sufficient distance from neighbouring properties so as not to interfere with the amenity interests of the occupiers. The primary windows for all habitable rooms are located on the principal elevations of the dwellings, allowing for acceptable levels of natural light, outlook and ventilation to the rooms they serve. The gardens, grassed areas and hedgings around the parking spaces serve to soften the appearance of the development and provide some visual relief from the hard surfacing. For the above reasons, in terms of character and design, the proposals would not be at odds with the prevailing urban grain. The proposed dwellings would each have 2 parking spaces. The parking spaces are an appropriate size, complying with the adopted parking standards. The proposed parking at the front of the site would indeed be prominent, despite the associated landscaping. However, the Highway Authority raised no concerns in terms of the parking provision, nor any safety matters. Given the constrained nature of the plot, officers feel that the parking provision is appropriate. The proposal raises no concerns in respect to flood risk, waste generation, collection and biodiversity net gain. In conclusion, the proposal is policy compliant development. Its realisation would provide 2 well-designed affordable homes on an underutilised site. The provision of new housing, even at this low number, will help reduce the council's housing needs burden, a factor that weighs substantially in favour of the application. For the above reasons, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions attached in the report. That's the end of the presentation. Obviously, I'll take any questions in regard to clarification.
Thank you, Mitchell. Members, we have one public speaker for this item, Mrs. Karen McGavigan, who is objecting to the application. Mrs. McGavigan, would you take your place at the microphone? You have 3 minutes to make a statement, and when you're getting close to the 3 minutes, I will ask you to sum up. Thank you very much. You would need to press the button on the microphone. Thank you.
Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for hearing us, residents of Carlton Drive. We understand your need to build hundreds of houses. However, this has been rushed and needs to be looked into further. I just also want to state that that picture is years old and the road doesn't look anything like that now, just putting that out there. It is detrimental to the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties, traffic, parking, noise. You also say there's parking standards. You don't live there, you don't understand what we go through. Knocking the garages down takes away approximately 10 parking spaces. The council have let an HMO appear in the street, which goes live at the end of this month, with a potential of up to 12 cars. That's more. Each house down the street has at least 2 cars, some more, a lot don't have driveways. It's a daily issue for the residents in our street to park in our own road when the townhouses, the shops, the customers, 3 takeaways, the delivery drivers and then the flats also use our street to park. It's an absolute nightmare when we return home and can't park in our own street. Also, to make you aware of a couple more instances, we lost a lovely lady in a fire due to a fire brigade not being able to get down the street due to the parking. Another one when a friend, an older guy, collapsed and the ambulance couldn't get down. Luckily, one of our other neighbours was home that day and he pushed the stretcher up with the ambulance men, otherwise he would never have made it to the hospital and he wouldn't have lived. Last year, there was a gas leak in a house with a young child. The utilities and the emergency service again couldn't get down the street due to the parking. This is only going to get worse and the decision that you guys make is on your conscience. With regards to my husband and I, we live in that one with the hedge at number 9. We've maintained the garages over many years. We've rented the garages off of yourselves for over 25 years. We've looked after it, we've resurfaced it, new fences, kept weeds down, cut the grass, kept it nice and tidy. No one ever comes and does it. We've done it. Also, upon purchasing the property from the council years ago, in writing from the council, we've got a promise that we'd always have access to the rear of our garden. We'll also be losing a part of our garden, which again we've rented for approximately 20 years, spent a lot of time and money having diggers in and putting up new fences in, etc. Adding salt to the wounds was hearing that we could have purchased that land last year from somebody from the council, but no one had informed us until this went up, and that was the guy that told us, which is upsetting when we've tried several times over the years to try and purchase from yourselves. Another problem for us is we don't have a driveway, a drop-down curb, and who's going to be paying for that? We can't afford that. We can't afford to do any more money into this, and due to health reasons, we also can't do it ourselves, and we'd be looking at compensation for all the costs and the work and the stress that this is causing.
Mrs McGevigan, could I just ask you to sum up, because we're just up to 3 minutes.
At
Thank you very
no
much.
time have any of the councillors contacted us to discuss the matter and give us help and advice, even though we've contacted the PIP and no one's got back to us. You're expecting us to do drop all this, and it's affecting mental health, and all the neighbours are very stressed over the parking. This has been rushed and needs looking into further, definitely a traffic survey of the road, both night and day. We ask that you listen to the residents. Displaced parking will occur, and we ask that the matter be deferred pending further inquiries.
Thank you very much, Mr McGevigan.
Can I just quickly say, when the
we are
council
coming up to 4 minutes now.
All right, okay,
3 minutes
thank
is
you.
allocated. It's the same for everyone,
All right,
as you would
thank
appreciate.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs McGevigan. If you could return to your seat. Thank you. Do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note that this is the member's opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters that are unclear of regarding the application. Please, members, just a reminder to refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Savage.
Yeah, Mitch, looking at, I looked at the site. I drove down the site a couple of weeks ago, and you can see trees in the background. And looking at the site as a triangle, I mean, I didn't realise it was as far back as that. There's woodlands. If you Google Earth that, there's like a load of trees behind that. Are we going to displace any trees in putting this development in, or do they all stay as they are?
Not as far as I'm aware. Obviously, we'll ask for a landscaping scheme as part of the conditions, assuming it's approved. So.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions, both of which relate to the parking issue. Can the officer explain if there's been any mitigation considered for the loss of all of those parking spaces within the garage area? And do you want to do it both of them together? Or and secondly, from if you go back to your drawing of the plan, the overhead plan, currently, I note from the photographs that you've shown that the current access to the garage area is from the northern part of that plot, Carlton Drive. So it's the northern side into the garages and round. What concerns me, and maybe you could explain this to me, why this is acceptable, is that the house, the proposal on the lower of the 2 houses, the parking actually egresses straight onto that bend, and with hedging and such like on the lower part of that, I imagine that would be actually a blind exit. And is there not a hazard there with that?
Potentially, all I would say in respect to that, obviously the highway engineers, they're the experts, they've raised no safety issue. So obviously we deign to their greater knowledge. In terms of parking provision, no, we haven't, because the site is council owned. I appreciate the use that it's been used for in the past, but it's not something we seek to do is canvass the neighbours and look for an alternative provision. The scheme is the scheme in front of you, unfortunately. So,
Councillor Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. With on the parking, how many of the garages are currently occupied or currently rented? I appreciate they may not be used for vehicles at the moment.
I think it's in the report somewhere. Apparently they're all used, but only one apparently is used for parking, and then irregularly.
So do we know if that is a resident of Carlton Drive? Because that's another vehicle we're then looking at putting on the road.
Like I say, I have no idea. Obviously, you are going to lose, by virtue of the realisation of the scheme, you're going to lose potentially, as the lady said, you're going to potentially lose 9 parking spaces. So.
Are there any more questions for the officer? Members, the Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1 of the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Huntman, as Vice Chairman, will you second the motion?
Yes, I'll second the motion, Chairman.
Thank you. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. I really, it just goes on from what I said before. I've got some concerns with this simply from the fact that that parking area to me seems to be serving a purpose, in as much that that is a road which apparently has a history of parking problems. And I just wonder whether the fact that those garages being parking spaces, and I guess within the area of the garage itself, is that actually a loss which actually contributes to perhaps making this site not quite as sustainable as the report intimates that it is. And also, I think, common sense, just looking at that overhead there, to me it seems that whoever's parking on that parking space on the lower of the two places would indeed have difficulty, particularly if extra parking is along the road is evident, of simply being unsighted when attempting to come out of that parking place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Huntman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, basically, as we all know, we've got to provide significant housing in the coming years, as the officer stated. And it seems to me if we don't utilise something like this, which is a perfectly suitable site for development, then where do we begin? But I do understand the concerns about parking, but these concerns are not limited to Castle Point. They're national concerns, and I don't know many roads where people don't have consistent problems with parking. It seems the case now that many families are 2-car families, and it's I know where I live there's problems, where my sister lives there's problems parking. So I sympathise with that, but I also understand the officer's position that it is council-owned land, and it is land that is ideal and suitable for this type of development.
Councillor Cortez.
Thank you, Chair. Like my colleagues have said, I don't think I particularly like it as a whole plan. However, the reasons I don't are not material planning concerns. I would hope that if it was taken forward with further detail and full planning application, that there could be some way to negate the parking issues coming off on the main road or coming off on the bend. hopefully to allow some form of access for the neighbours to the garden. But like I say, none of my concerns are actually material planning ones.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just go round the table. You are only strictly speaking to speak once. Councillor Savage.
I totally agree with Jamie Huntsman's, Councillor Huntsman's comments. We're just caught between a rock and a hard place with every one of these applications, aren't we? We know that we've got a massive shortfall that's got worse because of the change of government. And again, we know that if we turn this application down, and if it did go to some sort of appeal or an inspector looked at that, they'd just go, yeah, they'd pass it, wouldn't they? I know it's our land, but ultimately, you know, it's a good use of underutilised space. So, you know, I tend to agree with Jamie. Unfortunately, parking issues are a nightmare for everybody. And again, going along with Councillor Cortez's comments about the conditions, maybe an access for the neighbour to the rear of the property, might be something that we could look into, but I think it's an ideal site for two properties.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Fuller, I'll allow you to speak again.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to follow up, I completely agree with Councillor Savage in as much that there isn't a material planning reason why this can be refused. It's been quite evident from the report that the local highways authority have not objected, but I just, you know, we can't object to it, obviously, but I do feel that it's just a sort of rather a pity in this location that that, you know, there will be a challenge to parking. That's not something that can be solved by this committee. It's not a problem that can be solved by this council. It's as Councillor Savage has eloquently said, it's a national problem. So reluctantly, even though, in spite of my reservations about the parking, you know, as a judgment on the planning application itself and whether it satisfies the requirements of the planning policy, it does, and therefore I will support it. But I think, you know, in future we'll have difficult decisions to make about this again. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is to approve the application, subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. That is a unanimous decision. The motion is carried and the application is approved, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, members. That concludes the business for this evening. The meeting closed at 7:23. The live stream can now be stopped. Thank you very much.